Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's update on Hurricane Lee and the tropical Atlantic basin. So, Hurricane Lee continues to struggle. As of 5 p.m. Atlantic Standard Time, Saturday, September the 9th, Hurricane Lee has maximum sustained winds of 115 miles per hour, a minimum central pressure of 958 millibars, and west-northwesterly movement at 10 miles per hour. We have Tropical Storm Margaret with 45-mile-per-hour winds, central pressure of 1,004 millibars, and northwesterly movement at 9 miles per hour. And then we have two new disturbances with a 30% chance of tropical cyclone formation over the next 2 to 7 days. So looking at the latest cone for Hurricane Lee, Lee is now expected to remain a major hurricane despite weakening through at least Thursday afternoon as Lee passes about 500 miles to the north of the Lesser Antilles, Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, and now, for my friends in the Turks and Caicos and Southeast Bahamas, Lee is expected to make a northward turn several hundred miles to the northeast of these islands. So good news continues for my friends in the Bahamas, the Turks and Caicos, Hispaniola, Puerto Rico, the Caribbean, and I'll get to Bermuda a little bit later on in the video. So looking at the interactive map, interactive Zoom Earth satellite imagery and cone for Hurricane Lee, as I mentioned over the last couple of days, Hurricane Lee has been battling some moderate to strong wind shear, although we do see that Lee might be trying to put itself back together as we see a core of convection redeveloping, and Lee is looking more symmetrical than he was this morning and yesterday. So some of that wind shear might be starting to relax, and Lee is actually expected to undergo a strengthening trend over the next several days. Looking at Sunday morning, 1 a.m. Central Time, 120 mile per hour Category 3 hurricane or major hurricane moving to the west-northwest. Sunday, 1 p.m. Central Time, a 125 mile per hour Category 3 major hurricane moving to the west-northwest. Category 4 by Monday morning with 130 mile per hour winds, 140 mile per hour winds by Monday afternoon as a Category 4 major hurricane. Tuesday 1 a.m., 140 mile per hour Category 4 major hurricane curving to the west. By Tuesday evening or afternoon, 130 mile per hour Category 4 major hurricane moving to the west-northwest. Wednesday 1 p.m. Central Time, 120 mile per hour Category 3 major hurricane curving to the northwest and then curving to the north by Thursday afternoon as a 115 mile per hour Category 3 major hurricane. So taking a look at the wind shear map, Lee is still dealing with about 20 to 25 knots of wind shear, and until this wind shear lightens up, Lee is likely to not really strengthen too much, although the shear is expected to weaken over the next couple of days as Lee moves to the west-northwest. And looking at the latest infrared satellite imagery for Lee over the last 24 hours, Lee appears to be regaining some of its structure back, and we might see Lee start to intensify over the next 12 to 24 hours as Lee's structure begins to reorganize. Now looking at the latest spaghetti model guidance for Hurricane Lee, Hurricane Lee, once again, over the next 3 to 4 days, going to miss the Caribbean, several hundred miles to the north, Turks and Caicos. My friends, you look safe now, as the storm's going to pass well to your northeast. And then even Bermuda, with these latest models, these models are keeping Lee about 150 to 250 miles west of Bermuda. So Bermuda, you're going to miss the worst of the impacts, assuming these model trends hold. Now, looking at the latest intensity model guidance, all the models intensify Lee back to a Category 4 hurricane in the next 24 to 72 hours, and then gradually weaken Lee to a Category 3 over the next 5 to 7 days as Lee begins to move north into cooler ocean waters. And then looking at the GEFS ensemble tracks, the GFS ensemble tracks are keeping Lee well to the north of the Caribbean, Turks and Caicos, Bahamas, and now most of the ensembles are keeping Lee to the west of Bermuda by a by a decent margin, so Bermuda, you're likely going to be spared the worst impacts from Lee, thankfully. But as we go down the line to about 7 to 9 days, going up towards Maine, we see several ensembles making landfalls in Cape Cod, Maine, and then Nova Scotia. Make sure you're really paying attention to Hurricane Lee, as we see the majority of the ensembles of the GFS making a landfall in central eastern Nova Scotia in about 7 to 9 days, and Newfoundland in about 10 days. So looking at the latest European model ensembles, we see much of the same, staying well to the north of the Caribbean. A couple of members get close to the Turks and Caicos, but these have shifted to the northeast since yesterday's update. The European still shows some models getting close to Bermuda, but this has also trended to the west. And once again, Atlantic Canada, the New England, make sure you're really paying attention to Lee, as we got several ensemble models moving Lee into Nova Scotia, a couple into Maine, one across Cape Cod. So thanks for watching this evening's update on Hurricane Lee. Generally good news, as Lee's going to miss all of the islands, but if you're living in New England and Atlantic Canada, make sure you're watching Lee very closely, as the models keep trending to the west. Thanks for watching this evening's tropical update. Please stay safe and have a wonderful evening, my friends.